Week 11 of the fantasy baseball season, and here's a few hitters I look to drop this week. The first guy, Anthony Rendon of the Los Angeles Angels. So Anthony Rendon over the last few seasons, it just hasn't been good for him at all with injuries and bad performances here ever since he left the Washington Nationals, where he had a great career as an ad on the season. 5 home runs, 24 RBIs, 15 runs scored, 2 stolen bases, a 228 average, and a 324 on base. So Rendon out for the season once again this year with a broken wrist, and it's just been tough for him, man. He got his money, it seems like, and he just hasn't performed or been good at all for the Angels or fantasy owners. And it seems like this is what's been happening with the Angels over the last decade here. They sign a player who's been great with another team, and then he comes over to Los Angeles, and he's a total bust or just injury plagued. And right now, Rendon has been both. So the last 2 seasons, he's barely played. Last year, he only played Rendon about 13 weeks, and this season only 10 weeks he lasted before his season ended with a wrist injury. So right now, still owned in 40% of fantasy leagues. I don't get it. Dynasty and keeper leagues, no reason to keep him as well. He just hasn't performed, and right now I would drop him. So Anthony Rendon hopefully gets healthy, and hopefully next season he can bounce back and get back to form or close to it like he was in his Washington National days, because it's just been a struggle for him over the last few seasons, and that's just not a good thing, obviously. The next guy, William Contreras of the Atlanta Braves. So he's a very talented catcher and one of the top prospects in the Braves system over the last few seasons to come up. But the problem here with Contreras, he just don't play enough to garner fantasy value. And right now, he's owned in 58% of leagues on the season. 9 home runs, 17 RBIs, a stolen base, 18 runs scored, 284 average, and a 360 on base, but only 102 at-bats on the season here. And Travis d'Arnaud, their main catcher, he's having a great season, hitting another home run last night as well. So 9 home runs on the season for d'Arnaud. Obviously, he's getting good money. And you would think the Braves would find more playing time here for Contreras. A couple games early in the season, they tried him in the outfield. That didn't go well. I know they got the DH as well, but they just got too much hitting on this Brave team here to have Contreras getting an everyday opportunity. So right here, over the last few games, he really hasn't played much. June 12th versus Pittsburgh, 2 for 4, a homer, and RBI, 2 runs scored. Then he sat out all the way to June 15th at Washington, 1 for 5 with a run. Then June 18th at the Cubs, 2 for 4. June 19th at the Cubs, 0 for 4, and he hasn't played in yesterday's game. So right here, he sat out a lot, is William Contreras. And until he gets an everyday type of role, or at least play 5 days a week, then he would be gone or a fantasy spot. But right now, it's just not in the cards for him. And I would drop him, which is very obviously unfortunate that he don't play every day. Because if this guy played every day, he'd be a top 3, top 5 catcher most likely in fantasy baseball, especially the pace he's been on so far this season. And the next guy, Brandon Rogers of the Colorado Rockies. So Rogers, he's had a couple good weeks here and there, but I think he's owned in way too many fantasy leagues. It's 61% this year on the season. 6 home runs, 29 RBIs, 33 runs scored, a 243 average, and a 296 on base. So right there, those numbers aren't great at all, in my opinion, here for Brandon Rogers. But it's surprising to me he's still owned in 61% of fantasy leagues. And to dig deeper into the numbers, the last 2 weeks here, no home runs, 3 RBIs, 5 runs scored, a 163 average, and a 226 on base. I know second and short are weak positions in fantasy baseball, but right now, Brandon Rogers, he's just not contributing or doing anything really. I know he's one of the top guys to come up through the system over the last few years, but he's in a mighty struggle, and he's just not getting the job done for the Rockies or fantasy owners. June 14th versus the Guardians, 0 for 4 with a run. June 15th versus the Guardians, 1 for 3 with a run. June 16th versus the Guardians, 0 for 5. June 17th versus the Padres, 0 for 3. June 18th versus the Padres, 0 for 4. June 19th versus the Padres, 1 for 5 with a run and a rib. So right here, he's not getting the job done, is Brandon Rogers. And besides that one big game he had a few weeks ago where he hit 3 home runs in a doubleheader, he's just not getting it done at all here. And he's an easy guy to drop, in my opinion, this week, is Rogers. The next guy, Austin Meadows of the Detroit Tigers. So Austin Meadows, it was a big acquisition for the Tigers in the offseason, right before the season started. But Meadows, he's been a train wreck as well this year here on the season for Meadows. No home runs, 11 RBIs, 9 runs scored, 250 average, and a 347 on base. So last season, 27 and 106. But he's had 2 injured list stints here early in the year with the leg, and now he's on the COVID list here, is Meadows. But since his return a few weeks ago, 185 with no other stats for Meadows. So right now, this Tiger team, they're one of the worst teams in the league this season. And everyone, it just seems like they're struggling. Torkelson, they call him up, one of the top prospects in all of baseball. He's been a struggle the whole season. Javier Baez, one of their other big signings, he's done nothing. And Austin Meadows, who they acquired in the trade, like I mentioned, he's done nothing either. So right now, the last few games on his return, June 10th versus Toronto 0-4, June 11th versus Toronto 0-3, June 12th versus Toronto 0-3, June 13th versus the White Sox 1-4, June 14th versus the White Sox 1-3, and June 15th versus the White Sox 1-3. So he's been on the COVID list since June 16th, and I think Meadows should be back any day now, but he's just not contributing. He's not getting anything going. I know in deeper leagues it'll be tough to cut Meadows, obviously, because he's definitely got good potential. But so far this season, in the first 11 weeks here, it's been a lost season for Meadows, and he just hasn't been doing anything. And the fifth and final hitter I look to drop this week's Patrick Wisdom of the Chicago Cubs. So Wisdom, we know he's a big-time power hitter. And last season, he had 28 home runs and only 338 at-bats. But so far this season, 12 homers, 31 RBIs, 32 runs scored, a 216 average, 306 on base with 2 stolen bases, but already 88 strikeouts in 222 at-bats in the last couple weeks here for Wisdom. He's been non-existent for fantasy owners. No home runs, no RBIs, 167 average and a 318 on base. So the only positive I could get out of those numbers is his on base is still great, walking and stuff, but he strikes out a lot, and he's pretty much been a home run or nothing here is Wisdom. And right now he hasn't hit a home run in the last 3 weeks is Patrick Wisdom. The last few games here for him, June 13th versus the Padres 0-4, June 14th versus the Padres 2-4, June 15th versus San Diego 1-2, June 16th versus San Diego 1-4, and June 17th versus the Braves 0-2, June 18th he sat out, June 19th versus Atlanta 0-3, and June 20th at the Pirates 0-4. So he's in a crazy slump right now. Here's Patrick Wisdom, and he's just not getting anything going. No doubt about it. This guy could turn around and he could hit 10 home runs in a month. But right now, he's not giving fantasy owners anything, especially the last couple weeks. He's got no stats at all, not even a run scored. So right now, he's in a bad slump, and he's a player I would consider dropping here. If you don't want to, it's all right with his versatility and obviously his power potential. But right now, he's done nothing at all. So that's a few hitters I look to drop here for Week 11 of the fantasy baseball season.